Every profound change in life does not announce itself with noise or thunder. Instead, it whispers. The first movements are almost invisible, so quiet that they could be mistaken for nothing at all. The subtle beginning is the point where transformation is already alive, though few notice it. It is the faint stirring of a seed under the soil, the soft inhalation before the storm, the slight shift in awareness that alters the entire direction of a person's path. This is the place where possibility resides, waiting patiently for attention. The subtle beginning is often ignored because people expect transformation to come with clarity, certainty, or a dramatic event. Yet life rarely moves in extremes, it moves in shades, gradients, and transitions. Just as dawn does not strike the world with sudden daylight, but grows slowly from darkness into light, so does inner change. It starts with the smallest of recognitions, the realization that something feels heavy, that a certain pattern no longer serves, that an old way of being is quietly dissolving. These are not loud signs. They are whispers, subtle nudges that must be honored. To sense the subtle beginning requires the cultivation of awareness. Awareness is the lens that brings into focus what is too faint for the untrained eye. Without it, the small signs of growth remain unnoticed. Consider the still surface of a pond. To the inattentive, it seems lifeless. But for the one who looks with patience, tiny ripples begin to appear, movements beneath the surface reveal themselves, and life is seen in its most delicate form. So, too is the inner world. Without awareness, the subtle beginning is lost beneath distraction. This is why silence plays such an important role. In silence, the mind slows down enough to perceive the barely perceptible shifts. Silence becomes a mirror where the first light of change reflects itself. A single thought, fragile and fleeting, can pass by unnoticed unless one is still enough to receive it. But when received, that thought becomes the foundation of transformation. In the beginning, it does not feel like a revelation. It feels like a gentle suggestion, one that can be easily dismissed. Yet in time, it proves to be the spark of a greater fire. The subtle beginning also teaches humility. People wish for transformation to come in grandeur, with instant certainty and absolute direction. But true growth respects the natural pace of life. The tree that forces itself to grow too quickly becomes fragile, its roots shallow. The tree that grows slowly, honoring each stage, becomes strong and unshakable. The same principle governs the human spirit. When the subtle beginning is honored, growth is organic, grounded, and lasting. Another aspect of the subtle beginning is that it cannot be forced. You cannot demand it, just as you cannot command the sun to rise earlier than its time. But you can prepare for it. You can cultivate the soil of your inner world, remove what no longer nourishes you, and remain patient. The subtle beginning comes when conditions are right. It arrives when you are open enough to receive it, when you have created space for it to emerge. Often, the subtle beginning feels uncomfortable. There is a restlessness in it, as if the old self is no longer fitting, but the new self has not yet appeared. This in-between space is easy to misinterpret as failure or confusion. Yet it is neither. It is transition. It is the delicate threshold between what has been and what is becoming. Just as the seed must break before the plant can grow, so must the old structures of the self loosen before transformation can take root. The discomfort is not a mistake. It is a sign that the subtle beginning is at work. Patience and trust are essential here. Trust that the small shift matters. Trust that the unseen movement beneath the surface is as real as what can be observed. Transformation does not always need to be understood, it only needs to be respected. When you trust the process, you give the subtle beginning permission to unfold at its natural pace. In relationships, in habits, in thought patterns, the subtle beginning reveals itself in the smallest of ways. Perhaps a conversation no longer drains energy as it once did. Perhaps an old desire fades without struggle. Perhaps a new interest arises, not with fire but with a quiet curiosity. These are not random. They are signals that the inner current has changed direction. To the impatient, these moments are overlooked. To the aware, they are everything. The subtle beginning is powerful precisely because it is quiet. It asks for no recognition. It demands no applause. It is the essence of humility in motion. Like the roots of a plant, unseen beneath the soil, it lays the groundwork for all that will become visible later. If you wait only for the visible, you miss the true essence of transformation. The unseen sustains the seen. To honor the subtle beginning is to live with respect for process. It is to understand that the most profound movements in life are rarely immediate. They require attention, consistency, and reverence. It is to look inward not for fireworks, but for faint sparks, and to protect those sparks until they grow strong enough to light the path ahead. The subtle beginning is not a single moment, but a continual unfolding. Every new stage of life begins this way, quietly, almost invisibly. Each time you step into a deeper layer of awareness, each time you realign with a higher truth, each time you release something no longer needed, you are witnessing the subtle beginning of something new. Validation is one of the most subtle yet powerful hooks that grips the human mind. It is invisible, yet it directs actions, shapes words, and influences choices in ways most people never realize. At its core, the search for validation is the search for acknowledgement, the desire to be seen, heard, and accepted. This desire begins early in life, when approval from caregivers determines survival, and it grows into a pattern that follows individuals through every stage of existence. Validation becomes the currency by which people measure their worth, the invisible scale upon which they weigh their successes and failures. Yet the very pursuit of validation often traps them in cycles that drain energy, obscure inner clarity, and disconnect them from their authentic path. The hook of validation is powerful because it attaches itself to identity. When the mind internalizes the belief that its value depends on external recognition, it creates a dependency. Words of praise feel like nourishment, while criticism feels like starvation. The individual begins to behave in ways that optimize external approval rather than internal alignment. This is why many people live not according to their own values, but according to the shifting standards of others. The hook sharpens itself in professional environments where performance reviews, promotions, and recognition become signals of worth. It strengthens in personal relationships where affection, attention, and acknowledgement become the mirror in which self-image is reflected. The more this hook is reinforced, the deeper it digs into the psyche, and the more difficult it becomes to imagine a life free of it. Yet validation, by its very nature, is fleeting. What is praised today may be criticized tomorrow. What one person admires may be dismissed by another. External approval is never consistent, and therefore the search for it cannot produce stability. The hook keeps the mind restless, always chasing the next moment of affirmation, always fearing its absence. Like thirst that cannot be quenched, validation from outside becomes addictive. The irony is that the very thing people believe will give them freedom, recognition, becomes the very thing that enslaves them. It dictates emotions, governs choices, and determines self-worth without offering true peace. The energy consumed in seeking validation is energy lost from inner development. Instead of cultivating clarity, discipline, and alignment, the individual invests in performance, masks, and roles. The question shifts from what is true for me to what will make them approve of me. Over time, this erodes authenticity. The natural flow of energy, which is meant for growth and transformation, is redirected into maintaining appearances and ensuring acceptance. The inner voice grows quieter while the outer voices grow louder. Slowly, the individual loses contact with the deeper source of power that lies within silence and self-acceptance. The hook of validation is also deceptive because it often disguises itself as connection. People believe they are building bonds by seeking approval, but in reality, they are constructing dependencies. True connection arises when two individuals meet as they are, without masks, without performance, without the need to impress. But when validation becomes the foundation, connection is replaced by transaction. Affection is given in exchange for recognition. Attention is offered in exchange for approval. What appears as closeness is, in fact, a negotiation between needs. This creates fragility in relationships because as soon as validation is withheld, the foundation collapses. Breaking free from the hook requires deep awareness. It requires seeing how much of one's behavior is motivated not by authenticity, but by the hope of external acknowledgement. It requires questioning whether choices are truly aligned with inner values or merely designed to elicit praise. The mind must learn to differentiate between genuine feedback, which supports growth, and the craving for validation, which enslaves. Genuine feedback is constructive. It points to improvement while leaving self-worth intact. Validation, however, binds worth to approval, making the individual dependent. Recognizing this distinction is the beginning of freedom. There is also an energetic shift that occurs when validation is released. The energy once spent in chasing acknowledgement becomes available for presence. The restless search for recognition is replaced by stillness. Instead of reacting to external opinions, the individual can act from internal clarity. The voice within grows louder, more stable, and more trustworthy. Discipline replaces dependency, and authenticity replaces performance. This transformation is not immediate because the hook of validation is deeply rooted in conditioning. But with consistent awareness and practice, the hook weakens. Each time a choice is made from alignment rather than approval, the grip loosens. Each time self-worth is affirmed from within rather than sought from without, the pattern fades. Validation loses its power when one realizes that recognition does not define reality. The sun does not need praise to shine. The river does not need acknowledgement to flow. The tree does not need applause to grow. They exist, they fulfill their nature, they live in alignment with the principles of life itself. Humans, however, often forget this truth and measure their worth by the reflections given to them by others. The journey is to remember that life is not lived for approval, but for alignment. The glow of authenticity is brighter than the fleeting spark of validation, and the strength of inner conviction is more enduring than the applause of the crowd. When the hook of validation is active, the individual is like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. When it is released, the strings dissolve and movement becomes free, natural, and unforced. This is not the absence of recognition, but the absence of dependence upon it. Recognition may come, or it may not, but it no longer defines worth. It is seen as what it truly is, an opinion, a reflection, a temporary perspective. The deeper self remains untouched, steady, and unshaken. And in this realization, the individual begins to reclaim the energy that was once given away, redirecting it toward growth, discipline, and true freedom. Power is often misunderstood. Many think it is about control, about domination, about being above others in status, wealth, or influence. But the true shift of power does not happen in the outside world first. It happens within. The greatest transformation a person can experience is when they realize that the seat of power is not in the opinions of others, not in the numbers of possessions, and not in the roles that society assigns. It is within the clarity of the mind, the steadiness of the breath, and the unshakable presence that rises when you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. When you cling to external forms of power, you are never at rest. You worry about losing your position, your reputation, your authority. You spend energy defending what you believe is yours. Yet all of this is fragile, because anything that can be given can also be taken away. Titles fade, fortunes shift, bodies weaken. But the power that comes from within cannot be stolen. It is not dependent on circumstance, and it does not fear change. The shift of power is a turning away from illusions of control toward the mastery of the self. This shift requires honesty. One must ask, who truly commands my mind? Who commands my emotions? Who decides my responses to life? For many, the answer is unsettling. Their mind is ruled by fear, their emotions dictated by the past, their responses controlled by habit. In such a state, even if they appear powerful on the outside, they are enslaved on the inside. The shift of power begins when you reclaim authority over yourself. The ancient masters taught that to govern a kingdom, one must first govern the self. But governance here is not domination, it is harmony. It is aligning thought, word, and action so they are not at war with one another. A person in inner conflict wastes power like a vessel with cracks leaking water. But a person in inner harmony is like a vessel sealed, storing the force of life until it becomes unshakable. The shift of power is also a shift of perception. Instead of seeing challenges as threats, they are seen as teachers. Instead of seeing setbacks as punishment, they are seen as invitations to grow. This shift changes everything because suddenly the world is no longer against you, but working with you to refine you. The more you resist, the more you weaken. The more you understand, the more you strengthen. Power is not about what you can demand, but about what you can endure without losing your center. It is not about bending others to your will, but about bending your own will to align with truth. The one who can remain still in chaos, silent in conflict, and calm in uncertainty holds a power that armies cannot conquer. The shift of power happens when you realize you no longer need to conquer others to feel strong. Consider the weight of anger. When anger rules, it feels like fire, like strength, like action. But when it passes, it leaves weakness, regret, and emptiness. True power is not the eruption of fire, but the quiet of controlled flame. Consider the grip of fear. When fear dominates, it feels protective, like it is keeping you safe. But in truth, it is a prison, shrinking the world until it is no larger than the walls of your own doubts. The shift of power is breaking free of anger and fear, not by fighting them, but by seeing through them. The one who shifts power within becomes unshakable in the face of external storms. If the world praises them, they smile. If the world condemns them, they remain steady. Their power is not built on applause, nor is it diminished by criticism. It is the quiet strength of knowing who they are and what they stand for. But this shift is not a single moment. It is a discipline. Each day is an opportunity to practice mastery over reaction, mastery over impulse, mastery over illusion. Each moment offers a choice to give power away to the chaos around you, or return it inward to the stillness within. Over time, the practice deepens until one no longer seeks power outside, because they have discovered the inexhaustible well of power within. The shift of power is the journey from dependency to sovereignty, from being a servant of emotions to being the master of them, from being lost in the noise of the world to being rooted in the silence of the heart. It is not about gaining more, but about needing less. It is not about climbing higher, but about standing firmly where you are. And once this shift happens, life no longer feels like a battle to win, but a flow to move with. Doubt is a quiet guest that enters the mind without invitation. It does not knock on the door loudly. Instead, it slips in through the smallest cracks of uncertainty and settles in a place where it can grow. What makes doubt so powerful is not its initial presence, but the way it convinces you that it is truth. The trick of doubt lies in its disguise. It wears the mask of reason, it speaks in the voice of caution, and it convinces you that stepping forward is unsafe. Yet, when you look closely, doubt is not protection but paralysis, not wisdom but hesitation, not truth but distortion. The human mind is always searching for safety. It wants guarantees before taking action. It wants certainty before stepping into the unknown. Doubt understands this tendency and plays with it. It whispers, "Wait until you are sure." But certainty never fully arrives. There is always a possibility of failure, of rejection, of loss. Doubt magnifies these possibilities and turns them into heavy obstacles. In reality, they are only shadows, images with no substance, projections of a fearful mind. The more energy you give to these shadows, the larger they become. The trick of doubt is also in its timing. It rarely appears when you are at rest or when you are not reaching for something higher. It surfaces exactly at the point when you are ready to grow, when you are close to breaking through old limitations. Just before progress is made, doubt enters to test your commitment. It questions your abilities, it questions your worth, and it questions the path you are walking. This test is not meant to defeat you, but to reveal to you how much trust you truly carry within yourself. If you give in, you remain where you are. If you see through the trick, you step into a new version of yourself. Doubt also hides behind comparison. The mind looks outward, measures itself against others, and then decides it is not enough. Someone else seems stronger, wiser, or more capable. In that comparison, you reduce your own potential before even allowing it to unfold. Doubt convinces you that your growth must look like the growth of another. It keeps you blind to the uniqueness of your own journey. The tree does not compare itself to the river. The sun does not compare itself to the mountain. They simply exist in their own essence, fulfilling their own nature. Yet the human being, lost in comparison, feeds the trick of doubt and believes in the illusion of being less. Another way doubt tricks the mind is by attaching itself to past experiences. You may recall a failure, a mistake, a rejection. Doubt takes these memories and replays them like evidence, insisting that the future will only repeat the past. It convinces you that your history defines your destiny. But the truth is that each moment is new, and the past cannot fully dictate what is possible now. A child learning to walk falls many times, yet never interprets the fall as proof of permanent inability. Only later, when the mind develops stories, does doubt use them as weapons. To understand the trick of doubt, you must also see its relationship with fear. Fear imagines what might go wrong, and doubt gives voice to those fears. They work together, creating a cycle that keeps you from action. Yet both are only rooted in imagination. They are thoughts projected forward, not actual events. The present moment, when observed directly, holds no doubt and no fear. In the now, there is only breath, only movement, only life unfolding. It is the mind's tendency to live in imagined futures or remembered past that sustains doubt. When you begin to recognize doubt as a trick, its power weakens. The moment you see that doubt is not ultimate truth, but simply a thought, you create space between yourself and its voice. You can watch it arise, you can watch it speak, but you no longer have to obey. The trick is broken when you stop giving it authority. Doubt cannot control you without your agreement. It feeds on your attention, and when that attention is withdrawn, it fades back into silence. At the same time, doubt is not an enemy to be destroyed. It is a teacher in disguise. Its appearance signals that you are at the edge of growth. It invites you to look deeper into yourself and ask, do I trust my own steps? Do I believe in my own path? If the answer is shaky, then the work is not to silence doubt, but to strengthen trust. Trust is built through experience, through action, through walking forward despite the uncertainty. Each step taken dissolves a portion of doubt, and slowly, confidence replaces hesitation. The trick of doubt will never vanish entirely, because life will always bring new challenges and unknown paths. But its grip can be loosened. The more you practice awareness, the more you recognize the pattern, the less you fall under its spell. Doubt may still arrive, but instead of paralyzing you, it becomes a signal that growth is near. You begin to welcome its presence as a signpost. I am about to step beyond what I know. In this way, the trick of doubt transforms into a reminder. It reminds you that the path of growth is never about absolute certainty, but about the courage to move without it. It reminds you that hesitation does not protect you, but only delays your becoming. It reminds you that the mind will always invent reasons to stay the same, but life itself demands transformation. The trick of doubt loses its power the moment you decide that moving forward, even imperfectly, is better than standing still under the weight of endless questions. Control is one of the most subtle forces shaping human behavior, yet it often goes unnoticed because it wears many disguises. At first glance, control appears to be strength, discipline, and order. It feels like the ability to guide circumstances, to shape outcomes, and to prevent chaos from entering. Yet beneath the surface, control frequently reveals itself as fear disguised as mastery, resistance masked as certainty, and insecurity cloaked in authority. The cycle of control emerges when the attempt to dominate life creates more tension, which in turn generates the need for even tighter control, spiraling endlessly until the very thing one sought to avoid becomes inevitable. To understand the cycle of control, one must first recognize that life itself is not designed to be held tightly in the fist of human will. Life flows, shifts, and transforms in ways beyond comprehension. Seasons change, bodies age, relationships evolve, and time moves forward without regard for human demands. The attempt to resist this flow, to freeze what is impermanent, creates friction. This friction manifests as frustration, anxiety, and a deep sense of restlessness. The mind insists that if only everything could be arranged, contained, and directed, then peace would finally arrive. But in reality, the grasping only tightens the chain. Control begins with small seeds. A person feels uncertain, and so they create rules, plans, and routines. This gives a sense of security. When life obeys these structures, the illusion is reinforced. But when the unexpected breaks through, as it always does, the mind reacts with resistance. This should not have happened, it declares. And so, in response, the structures become stronger, the grip tighter, the demands heavier. What was once a simple attempt to stay balanced turns into a prison built from fear of unpredictability. The cycle deepens because control never truly satisfies. Achieving control over one area only reveals the instability of another. A person may control their environment meticulously, only to realize they cannot control the actions of others. They may control their body with discipline, yet discover their emotions rise uncontrollably. They may control their words carefully, yet find their thoughts race beyond restraint. Each realization of helplessness generates the urge to clamp down further, creating an endless loop of struggle. At its core, the cycle of control is fueled by the illusion of permanence. The mind clings to objects, people, outcomes, and identities as though they can remain fixed if only the right effort is applied. Yet the truth of impermanence undermines this at every turn. Just as water slips through a clenched hand, life resists confinement. The harder one squeezes, the more quickly it escapes. This repeated failure creates both exhaustion and the illusion that more effort is required. Few realize that the exhaustion is not from life itself, but from the endless effort to control what was never meant to be controlled. When control becomes habitual, it infiltrates relationships. It transforms love into expectation, generosity into obligation, and care into possession. Instead of allowing others to flow naturally, the controlling mind attempts to shape them according to personal desires. But the more one tries to mold another, the more resistance arises. Control generates rebellion, silence, or distance. The cycle of control feeds on this resistance, interpreting it as a threat that must be overcome with even stronger control, leading to conflict, disappointment, and emotional disconnection. On the inner level, control creates rigidity in thought and emotion. The controlling mind seeks certainty, but life is not certain. It seeks fixed answers, but wisdom is often fluid. It seeks unchanging stability, but growth demands change. This inner rigidity prevents flexibility, and when challenges arise, the person bound by control cracks instead of bends. They are not broken by the event itself, but by their inability to adapt to it. Control also binds the body. Notice how tightly a person grips when they feel afraid. Notice the tension in shoulders, the shallow breath, the stiff posture. This physical manifestation of control drains energy, reduces vitality, and creates chronic stress. The body becomes a mirror of the inner cycle, tightened, bound, and restless. Only when one begins to loosen this grip, to breathe fully, and to allow space, does energy circulate freely once again. The cycle of control thrives on illusion. It convinces the mind that without constant management, everything will collapse. Yet life does not collapse when control is loosened. It often balances itself in surprising ways. Rivers find their path without maps, trees grow without being instructed, and the body heals wounds without conscious effort. These natural processes reveal a deeper intelligence within existence, one that does not require constant control. To align with this intelligence is to recognize that letting go of control does not mean falling into chaos, but allowing harmony to reveal itself. Still, the habit of control is difficult to break because it becomes part of identity. One begins to believe, I am the one who must hold everything together. This self-image fuels pride but also deepens suffering. The cycle continues as long as the identity is tied to being the controller, the planner, the protector. To release the cycle, one must question this identity. Is it truly necessary to hold everything? Is life really waiting for human permission to move forward? Is peace truly found in control or in trust? The cycle of control consumes energy, relationships, and inner peace, and yet it disguises itself as protection. It promises safety but delivers tension. It offers certainty but creates fragility. It seeks freedom but generates bondage. The recognition of this paradox is the first step toward loosening the grip. When awareness shines on the cycle, its patterns become visible. And once visible, the possibility of choosing differently emerges not through force but through understanding. There are moments in life when the walls seem to close in, when the air feels heavy with repetition, and when the cycle of doing, striving, and proving begins to suffocate the spirit. In these moments, there emerges a whisper, almost too faint to notice at first, a reminder that escape is not a sign of weakness, but a doorway to a different way of being. The escape reminder does not always arrive in dramatic form. It can be the subtle unease when walking into a room that no longer feels like home. It can be the exhaustion that settles deep into the body after chasing goals that no longer hold meaning. It can be the silent recognition that the life one is living is not the life that was ever truly chosen, but one that has been inherited, expected, or blindly continued. To escape is not necessarily to run away. It is to remember that you are not bound to the structures you once agreed to. The reminder comes as an invitation to release the chains of identity built upon approval, to abandon the cages of comparison, and to walk beyond the fences of fear. Many hold on because the known, however painful, feels safer than the unknown. Yet safety is not always freedom. A cage, after all, can be beautifully decorated, yet it remains a cage. The escape reminder shakes the bars, forcing you to see them for what they are. Every human being is taught, in one form or another, to adapt. Adaptation becomes survival, and survival becomes habit. But there is a cost to endless adaptation. The more one bends, the less one remembers the original shape. The escape reminder surfaces to call you back to that shape, to the essence that existed before the compromises, before the adjustments, before the surrender to what others demanded. It is not simply about leaving a situation, but about leaving behind the version of yourself that no longer belongs there. Silence is often the first sign of the reminder, a silence that is not peaceful but restless. The silence of sitting in a room surrounded by noise, yet feeling completely disconnected. It is in that silence where the questions rise. Why am I here? What is this for? Is this the life I want to continue living? Those questions are uncomfortable, yet they are the sparks of awakening. The escape reminder does not give answers. It demands that you step into the unknown where answers cannot be predicted, only discovered. To escape does not always mean a physical departure. Sometimes it means an internal release, a breaking of loyalty to old wounds, a refusal to continue patterns that have kept the spirit dim. Escape can mean releasing the attachment to being understood, letting go of the constant need to explain yourself, and finally realizing that the greatest form of freedom is to exist without justification. Escape can mean breaking away from the endless striving to be more. When the truth is that you already are enough, the reminder comes in waves. At first it whispers. Then, if ignored, it grows louder. The body begins to speak through tension, fatigue, or illness. The mind begins to speak through restlessness, frustration, or emptiness. Life itself begins to speak through repeated disappointments, through patterns that no longer yield fulfillment. These are not punishments, but signals. They are the universe reminding you that you are meant to move, meant to grow, meant to expand beyond where you currently stand. There is courage in listening to the escape reminder. Courage because it asks you to dismantle the comfort of the familiar, to risk being misunderstood, and to step into a space without guarantees. Yet, what is the alternative? To remain where the soul is shrinking, where the spirit is silenced, where the days blur into one another without aliveness. The reminder exists so that you cannot forget life is not a prison sentence, it is a path. And paths are meant to be walked, not clung to. Often people think of escape as abandonment, but true escape is an act of devotion to the self. It is not abandonment but reclamation. To escape is to reclaim your time, your energy, and your alignment. It is to withdraw from battles that were never yours to fight. It is to free yourself from cages that were built from someone else's fear. When the reminder calls, it is telling you that you owe yourself more than the repetition of suffering disguised as duty. The escape reminder is not only about leaving something behind, but also about moving towards something unseen. That unseen future cannot be mapped, yet it carries the scent of authenticity. You may not know exactly where you are going, but you know you cannot remain where you are. That knowing, however unclear, is enough. It is the flame that lights the dark hallway, one step at a time. And still, the reminder will not disappear after a single awakening. It will return again and again, because life is not one escape, but many. Each stage carries its own cages. Each chapter carries its own walls. The reminder will echo in your heart each time you begin to shrink, each time you begin to betray your essence for comfort, each time you forget that freedom is your birthright. It will appear in different forms, in different seasons, in different disguises, but its message remains constant. You are not meant to remain trapped. The escape reminder is at its core an invitation to release the weight of what no longer belongs, an invitation to trust the vastness of the unknown, an invitation to step into the next chapter of becoming. Some will hear it and resist, others will hear it and respond, and those who respond discover that escape is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of remembering who they were always meant to be.